All right.
I kind of feel like that meant we were already live. I think
we didn't get a countdown there. We may have been live already.
I think that countdown was post already being
like,
live.
Yeah,
It felt
you've
like
been
that.
filmed. Yep, there you go.
Yep. Well, good evening, my
evening,
friends.
David Celia.
And we're glad that you're here.
Amy.
Go ahead and let us know in the comment space. Miss Amy Rowe, I was thinking about you. I know that you had you just hit a year mark from having the medical stuff that you had last year. And I was just really grateful that that you've been able to turn that corner. And I think Ellie posted something about it and made me think about that today. Glad you're doing well. Welcome, everybody. Come on in, and let's let everybody know we are getting ready for our penultimate. This is our penultimate class.
Because next week is Philemon.
Yeah, filet mignon. I feel like that's what you're about to say. But, what if we had fillets while we did
think
Philemon?
This should be a thing.
I don't think that's going to be a thing.
I mean, why
maybe afterwards. Maybe that's the way we'll celebrate afterwards next week. But we're very close. We're going to do some stuff in Titus tonight, and then we'll be in Philemon, and then we're going to be very close to. We'll have a couple of fill-in things for the last couple of things of this month, last couple of weeks of this month. And then I'm really excited. We are going to have, we're going to do in the summer, okay? Yeah. And I hope that you guys will be excited about it too. We're going to do, I think what we're looking at calling it right now is like a brown bag Bible study.
Brown bag Bible study.
Brown bag Bible study. And what we're going to do is we're going to have a space set up for people to eat if people want to bring their own food, or we'll have like a little box lunch kind of, well, it'll be dinner, but little box dinner.
Filet mignon?
Yeah, it probably will not be. It will not be filet mignon. It will not be it. And we're going to start off with some studies about Jesus, about the way of Jesus and things Jesus teaches his disciples to do. So that's coming up in the summer. We're going to start that on June 2nd.
Okay. Wednesday night?
On Wednesday nights, yeah. And I'm really excited about that. So June 2nd, 6:30 at night, there will be some kind of social space for people to kind of catch up and talk with each other. Try to find some good ways of doing that, of helping that. But and then we'll have a good, solid Bible study in the Gospels, to follow that with, and I hope you'll be a part of it.
So what are we going to do the 3 or so weeks between when this class is over?
Well, we've got to come up with some stuff.
Class starts.
I think we've got a little gap. Don't call it filler. It makes it sound like class is a hot dog. That's not the worst thing.
I mean, I like maybe
everybody likes a good hot dog.
Good hot dogs.
But that's going to be so. Anyway, that's what's coming up in the summer for our Wednesday nights. I hope you guys will be a part of it. I think it's going to be really fun. So. Okay, well let's dive into some of what we're doing tonight. Hey, Roger Tucker,
hey, Roger.
Glad that you're joining us as well. We're going to be in Titus, and the part that I particularly want to pick up with is in verse 11 of chapter 2. Okay. And then I would really like us to go from that section on into the first part of chapter 3, and we'll see how much we get. Maybe we'll still be doing Titus next week.
No, we'll get. Come on, it's just 3 chapters.
Yeah,
come on.
You would think.
Surely.
So let's read together, and let's start in Titus chapter 2, verse 11 and following. Okay? For the grace of God has appeared, bringing salvation to all, training us to renounce impiety and worldly passions, and in the present age to live lives that are self-controlled, upright, and godly, while we wait for the blessed hope and the manifestation of the glory of our great God and Savior, Jesus Christ. He it is who gave himself for us, that he might redeem us from all iniquity and purify for himself a people of his own who are zealous for good deeds. Declare these things. Exhort and reprove with all authority. Let no one look down. Hey, how's it going? We are broadcasting online tonight, is what we are doing.
Can I take communion?
Give me just a second here, Rob.
All right, so we just read verses 11 through 15. And not sure where to go from here. I'm not sure what Stephen was wanting to do with this. So we'll give him a minute. When you're broadcasting live in the church, you never know what's going to happen. All right. Stephen, you should have left me some show notes or something. I could have carried on
You
a
could have
little
jumped
bit.
on
I
in.
can't read your mind to know what you really wanted to hit on this.
Sorry,
So
yeah, we just had some guests show up, and we want to be show hospitality when we can.
Yeah.
So, all right. So how far did we get? We got through.
you went 11 through 15.
Okay. Well, let's just pick up right there. Okay.
Okay.
So here, of course, we're talking about Titus, which again is one of Paul's young proteges in ministry, and.
Can I just say it's weird that Titus, being a really young man, is going out and picking all the elders? That does not seem like a thing. Like if you grabbed one of the young professionals and you were like, you need to go pick all the elders at this church. That would be kind of weird, don't you think?
It is.
And that's one of the things he's doing in Titus. That's one of the things I noticed while I was reading.
It is a really, really strange part of it. Yeah. That's at the beginning of or in chapter 1, he's kind of going through this process.
But he has a lot of trust in Titus to be able to do that, right?
Yeah. Well, he trusts Titus. He trusts the Holy Spirit.
Yeah. Well, no, you're right. Yeah.
And I don't know. I really wish we could have gotten a little bit more than just pick people.
Yeah.
And pick people that are of these certain have
qualities.
That have these qualities and characteristics, which are not exactly the same as the ones that he gave to Timothy. But yeah, there's that process of. This was something that evolved. It's one of the places you get kind of a window into the evolving nature of the church, right? So these churches that are already here and established. Paul is writing to Titus, who's on the island of Crete, okay, and in this Mediterranean context, like these churches are getting to a place where they need to have this kind of internal leadership. It's important to recognize that was something that was just kind of this natural of evolution, okay. And the churches, as they matured, found themselves with people that took on more and more responsibility as they went. And Paul himself kind of evidences that in some of his conversations with elders in the book of Acts, okay, or especially in Ephesians, but also in the way he kind of talks about what's happening in these churches. Paul's churches are not, they are charged with responsibility. The church has a responsibility to discern and to have conversations with each other, There were no such thing as finished product churches then, and there's not now, okay? The churches were evolving things, that were growing in and discovering what it meant to follow God and to participate in God's mission in whatever ways they could, in whatever ways that the Holy Spirit led them. And we have these stories of the apostles being led by the Spirit into these different things, but we forget that the churches themselves had that too. The churches, we don't necessarily have a book of Acts that just follows the life of a particular church. It doesn't just sit at the church in Ephesus or in Crete or something like that. So what we have instead is we're looking over the shoulder through these writings, and trying to discern what's happening. And I just think we need to really recognize that part of what's happening is they're figuring out the answers to these questions as they go, and they
don't have the Gospels. They don't have all the information that we have right now. So they had to do a little bit
they
more.
don't have all these letters yet.
Yeah.
And even these letters, as we talked about, there wasn't Paul's lost manual of church either. When you get to the process, this is how thou shalt hold the election for elders, and And sometimes I think we get lost and we're trying to figure out stuff on our own. We think, oh man, I wish we had the same, I wish we had the same guidance at the. But y'all, they had less than we did in a lot of ways. Like we actually have the whole New Testament, right? And I think we can take encouragement from the fact that like what we have now is it's not that different than the way it's always been. It's following Jesus in community has always been about discerning the way as you go, And it's not like there was this copied and pasted thing that Paul did in one place and then he put it in another city. It was more like, and there was they started these communities of Jesus followers, of disciples, and gave them what instruction they could, and then they moved on to the next community, and that church that was left continued to evolve. And sometimes in ways that were really healthy, and sometimes in ways that weren't.
I was about to say, sometimes, Paul writes to a lot of them, and it's like, you need to change this or whatever.
Sure.
You got to do this different.
Yeah.
But that's...
But sometimes he has to do that because they didn't have that instruction on the front end.
Yeah.
Sometimes he's telling them, remember this thing that I taught you while I was there. But in other times he's providing some new instruction. So anyway, let's start. Okay, let's kind of get back into this text a little bit. In verses 11 through 14, for instance, I think he's not teaching them something new here, right? He's kind of giving them. We've talked a little bit as we've looked at some of Paul's letters that there is the combination of belief and practice, right? And so you believe these things, this theology, this doctrine, and then it has implications for these sorts of things ways that you live, okay? And you can kind of see that at work here, right? For the grace of God has appeared, bringing salvation to all, which is an enormous claim, okay? That's the work of God in Jesus, is to bring salvation, all right? If we keep on going, training us to, so now let's talk about the implications of that, right? Training us to renounce impiety and worldly passions, and in the present age to live lives that are self-controlled, upright, and godly. Which, of course, is reflective of the sorts of things that he's said up above about elders and even on young men in the church. It's just kind of the picture of what God wants people to be. Learn to have some control over yourself, right? And to live in a way that honors God. And we'll kind of get to some specific things about that in in a few minutes, but. To live lives that are self-controlled, upright, and godly, I think is a good, that's a good trilogy of things. We've talked, Paul's tendency to kind of offer those things. I think these are fairly self-explanatory, but basically we're to live in such a way that we are not just kind of carried away by our passions. I think is the frame there.
I like how grace trains us to do these things.
Yeah.
Which we could get into the whole faith versus works thing if you want and spend the whole time tonight talking about that. But I doubt that's exactly where you were going. But I do think that this is kind of a snapshot of his theology on that, is that we get grace, and that's what's training us to do to live the righteous life, right?
Well, and it's an expansive vision of grace, right? So if in the second part of this, he says, he goes on to say, while we wait for the blessed hope and the manifestation of the glory of our great God and Savior Jesus Christ. So there's going to be this later moment when God's glory is revealed. But then we get verse 14, which is to your point. He it is, Jesus, who gave himself for us, that he might redeem us from all iniquity and purify for himself a people of his own who are zealous for good deeds. Now, redeem there is not just a substitution for forgive, right? It's not redemption from sin or redemption from iniquity. In this context, I think means taking us away from the power of sin over our lives. Right? So it's not just that we are forgiven from some list of things that we've done in the past, but we're brought from that and purified. These things go together, right? We're redeemed from our sins. We're brought from the power of sin and and purified to be his people who are, as he describes, being zealous for good deeds. I think this goes back to that same thing as that he's talking about up there before, right? Like it is grace that's come, and grace breaks the power of sin over our lives. Like that's really core to Paul's way of thinking about the spiritual life, that we are no longer powerless to the forces of sin at work around us and even within us. But instead, we're kind of ushered into this new possibility of a life that is pleasing to God, because of the active way that we live, and surely the things that we avoid too, but we're no longer, like that's the whole thing, right? Like renounce impiety and worldly passions. Okay, that's like the stuff that kind of sweeps you away. When I hear that, to renounce worldly passions, I don't know if you feel this way, Rylan, but I immediately kind of put that in the category of like pleasure seeking, like hedonistic pleasure seeking, so sexual stuff or gluttony, I think for Paul, it'd be a much broader field of things, okay? So if we, look later on, okay, look in verse 3 of the next chapter, okay? Or let's just go ahead and read some of this next chapter, because I think it gives a picture of passions.
Okay, what about, so impiety goes along with that. Are those things kind of synonyms, or? Because impiety is not a word we use very much.
Impious, yeah, we kind of use the positive form
pious
of that,
every
or
once
pious,
in a while, but not really.
Let's see here.
Do we have a comment?
Oh, yeah, I don't know that we have a guaranteed age of Titus. I don't know.
Oh, look at this.
Oh, look, we didn't scroll down.
It's not scrolling down.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Hey,
Celia,
RH
we
and
missed your
Peggy's
question
here,
there.
Betty's here.
We weren't trying to
It's
ignore you,
just not
Celia. I
auto-scrolling.
promise. We just didn't. We didn't have the advantage of the scroll there. So I don't know. No, I think our assumption is that Titus is a young man, but I don't think we know exactly how young he is. Okay.
Paul does call him his child, and so he could say that of an old man. I guess it could be possible, right?
Yeah.
Let's hear.
Yeah. To my loyal child in the faith.
Yeah. So I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean he's young, but
yeah. I don't know. That's a good question, though.
He does also use the same language that he uses with Timothy, I think, when he says, "Let no one look down on you."
Yeah.
And with Timothy, he says, "Because of your youth."
Right.
And so that kind of reminds me of what he said to Timothy, and makes me think Titus might be young also, but it's not explicitly.
Yeah, I don't think
stated.
I was trying to think if there was any other commentary on his youth in the letter, and I don't really think there is. I may be missing that. Yeah, sorry. That's the best I can do. I wish I could answer that more clearly. Where are we? Okay, yeah. So let's read into chapter 3, because I think we can get a little bit more color on the picture of worldly passions at that point. Okay. So it says, remind them to be subject to rulers. Remind the people of the church to be subject to rulers and authorities, to be obedient, to be ready for every good work, to speak evil of no one, to avoid quarreling, to be gentle, and to show every courtesy to everyone. For we ourselves, now this is the picture that Paul paints. He says, we ourselves were once foolish, disobedient, led astray. And he says this, slaves to various passions and pleasures, passing our days in malice and envy, despicable, hating one another. Now that is quite a description, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's not a kind description either.
No.
But he lumps himself in. He says we, so it's not.
Yeah, which is hard to imagine, because Paul, that we know as being a zealous, Pharisee.
Yeah.
What's really evident to me in this text is how they were. Is kind of these different synonyms for it's like a cloud of words that all refer to being contemptuous of other people.
Yeah.
And so when I think about being swept away by passion, I think about it as being desires, okay? But to me, I think Paul speaks of the passions as also being like those things that just kind of inflame you, like your anger and your rage and
Even like a zealous rage.
that's
That he
exactly right.
had.
Because it was
Yeah.
like those are the kinds of passions that Paul knew about, right?
Yeah, and it made him happy to arrest people and send them to jail and whatever. So those pleasures, you know, if
I mean, I
I've
do think
never
that
thought about.
hedonistic stuff is included in there,
Yeah.
But in the ancient world, a passion was just something that swept you up, okay? And so, anger is just as much a passion as lust is, that it's something that kind of like takes you away. And we share this, right? Like we share this kind of, we can think about how passionate somebody's being, which means they're speaking forcefully, maybe. But Paul like really warns about all this stuff that you can kind of be swept up in.
It's kind of like being all in on one idea and then closing yourself off to anything else. Is that kind of?
I think it's like giving yourself over to something. Of course, passion, like if you think of the word passive, it's kind of the same thing, right? Okay, like passio, okay, it is allowing something else to act on you. Like we think of like active and passive verbs, right? Like something is being done to you, or you are in control doing something.
Yeah.
And Paul really does not want them to be passive to these like spirits of the world that like move us without our conscious reflection on them. And in some way, Paul is along the lines of like an ancient Stoic, okay, in that kind of line of philosophy a little bit. The Stoics were people that believed in kind of taking control of yourself by disciplining your body, by disciplining your mind so that you're not swept up in the passions. Paul's not a Stoic, but he has like a lot of affinity with them, I think.
Yeah.
There is this place where
He doesn't
like,
believe you should have no emotions. That's kind of stoicism, right? Like you're very stoic. You don't.
well, at least
you're
you don't
not
give
moved.
yourself over to them. You're not a victim of your emotions. Yeah.
But you can have emotions.
Yeah, I think you can have emotions, but you don't want to be a victim of your passions. I think that's the.
You don't
We
want your
think of
emotions to
passions as
control you.
being positive, but I think Paul, and like the ancient Stoics, would want to resist being victimized by your passions. That in a way, your passions can be something that, like he uses like strong language here, right? Like being slaves to various passions. Slaves, being a slave, being enslaved by your passions, means that you really don't have autonomy anymore. You're just kind of being swept up in the things that stir you up.
Sounds kind of like an addiction.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, that's really true. I mean, I think Paul would use that kind of language for that. As something that enslaves you. And I don't know. I think this is really good advice for us because a lot of people maybe they think of addiction as just being something, a substance, substances that are abused. But you can be addicted to the rush of emotion that comes from all kinds of passions. So you can be addicted to the feeling that your anger gives you. You can be addicted to the feeling that chasing any passion gives you. You can learn to like that feeling of like losing control in an argument.
Yeah. Letting someone have it, or
even fantasize about it. And
that's what I do. I usually don't say the thing, and then later I'm like, man, I should have said this. You know, and then that's my thing.
there's this old song by a group called Fleming and John. You've heard of Fleming and John?
Fleming and John.
Yeah, I don't know. They're this old like Christian group from the '90s, and they had a song that was called "Letters in My Head," and the chorus said something like, "I'm writing letters in my head of all the things I should have said."
Yeah,
that they're kind of re-rehearsing an argument, and it can kind of feel good to feel like, oh, this is what I should have said and should have let loose on somebody, or like really anticipate, man, if they see me, if I see a person, and even when we when we watch fiction, like when we watch movies and stuff like that, that's part of what our brains are doing, is we're riding along, kind of fantasizing about like what we would do, you know, if we were in this gunfight,
Yeah.
you know, or if we were,
Oh man, like, or if you're in a horror movie and then they run upstairs and you're like, why would you run upstairs?
Yeah,
You need to
yeah.
get out of the house. That's, I mean, we do though, right? They write these things where you're like, don't do that,
fear,
don't do that, don't do
fear's,
that, because
fear's
you
a passion
know.
too, right? Like,
Yeah, because you know. But anyway, yeah, you're right.
yeah, because it's something that can take control of you, you know, and it's really interesting you put that, because like in a horror movie, what the audience is doing is they're letting themselves, you're kind of giving yourself permission to ride the passion of fear, you know, and the wave of emotion that comes from that, in a supposedly
Safe,
harmless
yeah.
you know, way, like you're not actually going to get chased and murdered in that way. But our humanity gets a rush out of riding the waves of the waves of passion, and yet they can be entirely destructive to us, because they can, in the real world, they take us to places that, hey Danny, our passions can take us into really unhealthy places, and they can take us into places that are hurtful to ourselves and are really hurtful to other people too, you know. And I think Paul's like writing to Titus, he's saying, like, he's kind of envisioning a community that knows how to check that, right?
Well, in some ways, he's telling Titus to be the check for it, right?
Yeah,
He's like, we rebuke these people. Like, he names specific groups. We talked about that last week, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't just usually generally just say, be mean to, or do this negative thing, but he does aim people at certain groups and say, tell them to stop doing that, or tell everyone to leave that person alone, or whatever.
That's right. And here, if you think about what he's offering to Titus, like instructing the church to be disciplined, remind them to be subject to rulers and authorities, to be obedient, to be ready for every good work. Like, so far so good, right? To speak evil of no one. Okay, well, that's something that's like really easy to kind of get swept up in.
Yeah. Well, and also, like, what's your definition of speaking evil of someone? Because Paul, like, directly goes in and says, these people are, you know, not acting right.
Yeah.
Right? So is Paul speaking evil of them? Or would he say, you know, this is just my duty as an apostle to, like, call them as I see them?
Well, if you think about it like as a discipline, though.
Yeah.
Right? Like, let's keep reading, right? Like, to speak evil of no one, to avoid quarreling. You think about that, I think, as discipline. Like, I'm not going to let myself kind of get swept up into, like, the rush of arguing.
Yeah.
You know, and then he says, and then like add this one in, like, to be gentle. Now, we normally think of like gentleness as like a disposition. You know, people just either are gentle or not. We just like to say that's like a personality characteristic. Like,
and usually, and a lot of times, it's not even a positive thing in our culture right now. Like,
oh yeah, like
it
meekness.
Could be it could be a negative.
Yeah, like they're just too gentle.
You're too meek. You don't take.
Well,
up
for Paul's world, for sure. Paul's world is definitely like that. You know, the Roman world, like, pride was not a vice. Like, it was.
Yeah.
Pride is a virtue. You know, humility was not a virtue. You know, for them.
Right.
But here, like gentleness is offered as something that Paul is supposed to, or Titus is supposed to tell everybody. Like, gentleness is a Christian discipline, and it's the discipline of making sure that you treat people in a sort of way that's not harsh. You know, like, you don't allow yourself to give in to the impulse of harshness. This is a different kind of disciplined community than I think we normally think of. We normally think of it as like the things, we've talked about this with in the letters to Timothy, the stuff you put into your body, they thought about it in the kind of food, kind of thing. That's kind of the discipline of the body. But in Paul's set of disciplines, the kinds of passions that he's warning people to check against is like the way that you treat people. So much so that we kind of think of those as dispositions.
Yeah.
They're agreeable. Well, being agreeable isn't just like a personality trait. It's actually like
it's
discipline.
Something you can choose to do.
You can choose to do that. You can choose to not fight.
Can't just say I'm not an agreeable person and then
Yeah.
Say sorry.
I'm a like to fight guy, you know.
Listen, and he's saying this to people who lived on Crete. So tell us about Crete real fast.
Yeah. So there's this other piece. Where is this down in here? Is it in the? Or
This can't
before,
be easy.
isn't
This is in here. It's in.
It's in chapter 1.
Is it 1?
Yeah, it's in
Okay.
chapter 1 where he says that, like, he's talking about like the culture there, and he says it's one of those people.
He quotes a Cretan
I think,
philosopher or
yeah, I
something,
guess,
or-
yeah. And it says that they said Cretans are always liars, vicious brutes, and lazy gluttons, which
That's what
is a
the rest of
hilarious
the
quote.
world thought about Crete, right? Like,
Yeah, they had this reputation for
Yeah.
being brawlers,
yeah.
you know.
And you're in this society where I can't imagine a society where everyone's yelling at each other and getting in fights all the time.
yeah.
But but you've got to have this gentle, humble disposition.
Yeah.
Or
Don't don't allow yourself to be,
Yeah.
In this kind of, and I mean, when he talks about this picture, and he's saying that this is like what the outsiders look like, right?
Yeah.
That the outsiders are, they pass their days in malice and envy. It says despicable, which is like such a harsh word, But to pass
He is
their
being
days
really harsh.
in envy and malice is like a certain posture of the heart, And he's saying, like, to revise that, like, don't live that way. Instead, there's this alternative where you resist quarreling. You're ready for any kind of goodness, and I think that's to do to good people, to other people, not to good people, to do to your neighbors. Like you're ready to act with kindness and mercy to your neighbors, and you are doing that while you like watch your tongue and you don't like idly talk about people negatively. There's a real picture here of, I think this section from like 2:11 through 3:7 or something like that. I just think there's such a picture of, I don't know, for me in our world that is so beset with like fights all the time and quarrelsome words, and like I'm just in a place where this is this is really aspirational to me. I think it's really aspirational for the church. Like what if the church could live in such a way that had a real self-discipline of the kinds of fights that we were willing to like walk into or not. And that's not to mean that we don't like stand up for like values and truthfulness and all that kind of stuff. But there's a difference between standing up for what you believe in and like being a jerk.
Yeah.
That feels justified because you think the things that you believe in are right. And so that, really practicing that posture of a gentle firmness, maybe, I was thinking earlier today, and I posted some stuff on the social media that kind of expressed this. Like, I've really been thinking about what it means to be a person who enters into like good faith conversations. Okay.
Yeah.
I know you didn't see this because you're on Facebook, which is the huge irony of the last year. Y'all, Rylan is not even on Facebook. He's been on Facebook on the live broadcast like every week. For
I'm
the last
only
year.
on Facebook to check the comments for the live broadcast.
That's it. That's all he's ever. But to me, like, people use this phrase of like entering into like a good faith conversation or something like that. Like, and that just means like entering into a conversation where you come into it not ready to fight.
Right. Yeah.
You're going to tell the truth. You're going to be honest and open, but you're also going to listen without, being ready to go to fight it the first time.
That's not just a normal conversation that you have on Facebook that you see people having.
Yeah.
Right? It has to be intentional.
But it could
most
be.
of the time. Well, it could be.
Yeah. I mean, what Paul describes right here to me is good faith. Mm-hmm. It's you enter into like a conversation with someone, and of course you're going to tell the truth as you're going to represent the truth as you see it, as best you can. What else can you do? But you're going to do it in a way that has like a gentleness. I think that's just kind of a different posture towards the world. And I think the church really has an opportunity to be countercultural in that. Like, I think, to me, when I think about not giving in to the waves of our culture and the passions of our culture, I think having a sense of discipline and restraint that looks like gentle lovers of truth, is a way that we can like really make a difference in the world, I think. Okay, man, that's what I got for us today. I love this section of Titus. It's some of the other is kind of, he's like giving instructions about how to like appoint elders or whatever. It gets kind of procedural to me. Although I think that's very useful because it gives kind of a portrait of what it can look like to be it's an aspiration of the whole community to be that kind of person. But this section where he's just like really kind of drawing this picture of what people who have received the grace of God look like, and I think it's really beautiful.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's the hard thing is figuring out in a specific situation that you're in, like how to do that. Because sometimes you think that you're doing it and you're not, or like it's really difficult. It's not easy. It's it's easy to say, but not easy to do.
And it's harder to do, we should say, if you're tired, if you're hungry, if you feel alone, you feel isolated. When you feel those kinds of things, it's harder to live out the discipline of all this, right? So there are ways. It's not just about living it; it's about practicing it over and over again, so that it becomes more like your new nature, and also living the kind of life that. I mean, if you're constantly in fear and constantly wound up with anxiousness about the way people feel about you or something like that. It's hard to respond with gentleness, but if you can, follow the kind of life that like allows you to receive the love of God and develop a disciplined life, then these things can become more natural to you. Like I really do. I think I'm more likely to live this way now than I was, 10 years ago.
As you mature, you get more.
You would think so.
Humble and.
That's not necessarily true. It is true.
You mellow out.
It's true that it's true if you say as you mature.
You're not a fiery.
It's not true if you just say as you age. Okay?
Yeah, that's true.
Aging is inevitable. Maturing is not.
There's not necessarily a correlation between aging and maturing. That's what you're saying.
There's not a necessary corollary. Yeah. Although, I mean, but I think we should look to our seniors as people that, as they follow Jesus, hopefully are giving themselves to mature in these things more and more.
Yeah. Plus,
And I do know a lot of people like that. I feel like I know a lot of people that represent that too. So, okay, we are a little bit over on time. So thank you for bearing with us. We are done for the week, and we will catch you guys next week, and we'll be ready for
one more book.
Philemon. Be our last ride with Paul.
Yeah.
And then we'll have some surprises in order.
Oh, we're gonna do something fun.
Oh, it's gonna be
have
fun.
To.
Yeah. Not next week.
The week after.
Yeah.
Next week will be boring old Philemon.
No, next week will be fun too. Okay. All right. Thanks, guys. Grace and peace.